G'day everyone, my name is Coolpilot and welcome to another episode of Marrilcraft. Kind of, because we're not in Marrilcraft. Welcome to the Matrix. This is my little test world I just created. My first one was just a kind of a flat grass that I tested the Azumarill square on. This is more technically a super flat world, not a flat grass, because there's no grass. It's just quartz. This is what I actually wanted. I just didn't have the time to set it up the first time around, or figure out how to set it up, because it wasn't working the first time. Apparently, you need a underscore between the quartz and the block when you're trying to put it on the presets. Anyways, the Marrilcraft server is currently offline because Maryland is on vacation during Worlds. He's over at the Mall of America. So I am here in the test world to instead, because since the server is offline, we can't do anything over there, to talk about block energy. This episode will be completely devoted to talking about block energy, which is an aspect of Minecraft architecture, a very important aspect of Minecraft architecture that, well, if you want to get serious about building in Minecraft, you kind of need to know about this, or at least, understand innately block energy, even if you don't know how to describe it properly. But block energy is super important. It is something that I will no doubt be bringing up many times as I build in Marrilcraft. So it's something that's good to cover now while the series is early on. It's not something I'll probably go into that much with the clock tower, because the design is already kind of set and it doesn't play that much into the design. Though it does play some bit of a role in the design. It is something that will still come up quite a bit with my other builds. So if I turn around here, you'll see the spawn point over there. That little command block is a little target around. This is just to give me command blocks if I ever need them to test anything. That way I don't have to actually write in the command for it. I can just go up there, go bloop, and get the command block. Now all of this giant wall of blocks, this is what we'll be going over today. Block energy. So, what is block energy? Well, block energy is, the energy of a block. It's basically how the texture affects the eye, your eye, and how that corresponds to how you use the block and how you build with it. The best way to get started is to talk about the main form of block energy. Well, pretty much the standard thing that you're going to be talking about most of the time when it comes to block energy, which is directional energy, directional block energy. So, these are a variety of directional energy blocks. Basically what this means is that the texture of the block kind of flows in one direction, drawing the eye in that direction. So you can see the logs of a tree. I've got two different types here. Both draw your attention vertically with the way I have it placed here, because the lines within the texture are elongated in this vertical direction, so it draws your eye in that direction. Same thing applies to this quartz pillar. The lines draw your eye in that way, as well as the purple pillar. Yes, I remember the name of the block. It's pretty new, so the lines on the edges of the block, as well as the orientation of these little tiles in the middle, all draw your eye up and down. All these blocks have vertical block energy. And these guys over here, these slightly different logs, the birch logs and the jungle logs, they have lines, in terms of birch, primarily the black lines going more horizontally, although some of the white goes a little horizontally as well. And then the jungle's a little bit more obvious, because it's basically just this guy, but sideways, pretty much. And of course, these pillar blocks can all be placed sideways as well. And in this orientation, and with these guys, placed, normally, these all have a horizontal block energy because they draw your eye horizontally. And then when these guys are placed vertically, as I have them over here, placed sideways, basically, they then have vertical energy because the lines are going vertically. And what this basically means is that because they draw your eye in one direction, you generally want them to be placed in that direction. You want them to be primarily placed in the direction of their energy. Essentially, you want the use of these blocks to be longer in the direction of their energy, so longer vertically or longer horizontally than they are in the opposite direction. So, for instance, if we take oak wood here, we can make a wall of oak wood, say like 4 blocks wide, but if it's all horizontal like this doesn't look all that good because the lines of the block are trying to draw your eye up, and it doesn't go up very far. It goes farther wide than it does go up. So generally what you'd want to do is that you'd want to build this wall at minimum equal, square, but generally you want it to be, in this case, because it's a vertical energy, you want it to be taller than it is wide, like a giant tree in this case. So, this looks a lot better than that. This doesn't look that good, or look as good, because it's trying to draw your eye up, but the actual shape of it is too wide versus its height, whereas this looks a lot better because it draws your eye all the way up to there, and it's not as wide. So that's a basic guideline on how to use the vertical ones. Horizontal, much the same, only you want it to be longer horizontally than you want it to be tall, generally. You don't have to follow all these rules 100%, but that's generally how you want to use directional energy blocks. You also have a lot of neutral energy blocks. In fact, most blocks are neutral energy. These are blocks that do not flow in any one direction, or they flow in all directions equally. Basically, their texture just kind of blends into each other, pretty much. And, well, kind of. We'll get to some stuff that doesn't follow that rule. But the point is that it doesn't draw your eye in any one direction over the other. And these can be used in any size or shape or direction without having any problems, like a short wall of vertical energy blocks or a really tall, skinny pillar of horizontal blocks. Like, actually, we'll do this for example as well. These jungle wood blocks, if we make them really tall and skinny, jungle wood kind of gets away with it because it's jungle trees are meant to be kind of tall and skinny. But as a building block, when it's not a tree and you're using it as a building block, it doesn't look as good because it's trying to draw your eye horizontally, and instead the whole thing is really vertical. So these guys, you don't have that problem. You can use it in any size or shape. You can make a big pillar of cobblestone. You can make a really wide wall of cobblestone. You can make a gigantic square of cobblestone or stone or any of these other blocks that I have examples of here. And it doesn't make a difference. I even have this chiseled quartz block. This is a highly detailed block, but it is a very neutral block. It doesn't draw your eye in any specific direction because you have these sort of things going vertically, but it also kind of melds together horizontally as well, and you get these parts in between that horizontal. It just is overall fairly neutral. It draws your eye in multiple directions at the same time. Most of the rest of these don't draw your eye in any direction at all. You get like dirt and hardened clay, sand. Most blocks, most of the natural blocks at least, are neutral like this. So they tend to be, the most useful for making large walls, whereas these vertical and horizontal ones are really good for making pillars and supports, because they can go very well in skinny, tall pillars for the vertical ones, and for the horizontal ones, they work well for skinny but long, short but long supports, I should say. Then we have semi-directional or semi-neutral. They're completely interchangeable. You can say it either way or both ways. Doesn't really matter. Energy blocks. These are ones that have both vertical and horizontal energy to it. The texture flows in both directions, but one direction is more dominant than the other, unlike neutral energy blocks like this guy, where they're both equal to each other. These have energies in both directions, but one of them still overpowers the other. There just is some form of the other directional energy. The secondary energy is usually caused by stacked texture within a single block of the texture. Like these bricks, you have multiple bricks on top of each other, or planks. multiple planks on top of each other, multiple bricks on top of each other, multiple bricks, 2 bookshelves stacked on top of each other, multiple little beams in this column, stacked left and right of each other, horizontally of each other. With these guys, you've got like a couple sections of hieroglyphics, plus this little beam at the top, stacked on top of each other, and again, more bricks. And these create a bit of some minor vertical energy because they're all within one block. Like if you have a good example, oh yeah, over here, back over here. Let's fly over. Very creative. These purple pillars, fly back over here. These purple pillars, you can stack them next to each other, and you can say, well, let's do it horizontally here. Give a slightly better example since most of these are horizontal here. You can stack them on top of each other and say, oh, like each one of these blocks is a brick, but that doesn't give this block any amount of vertical energy in this orientation. In fact, this thing has 0 vertical energy. It is entirely horizontal energy block because for one block, when you're looking at just one block texture, the actual texture of the block, there's no vertical energy here. It's just all horizontal thanks to these 2 beams. This little middle section is neutral. We'll get more into the details of what this sort of block is in a moment, a little farther down there, because there's a little bit more detail to go into that. But this thing is a fully horizontal block. Whereas if we go with a single brick texture, get it at eye level again, there are multiple bricks stacked on top of each other in one block. That gives this block a bit of vertical energy. It's not a lot, it is still very much a horizontal energy block, but it is enough to make it so that it can be used vertically. In fact, most of these semi-directional, semi-neutral energy blocks are primarily horizontal energy with a bit of vertical energy, because it's primarily these brick blocks and the wooden planks are the main ones that are semi-directional, with a few extra bits like the bookshelves and these hieroglyphics are also horizontal energy with a little bit of vertical energy. The only big standout is the quartz pillars, which, they can be placed sideways, of course, to also give you horizontal energy blocks like that with a bit of vertical energy. But their standard orientation, they are a vertical energy block with a little bit of horizontal energy thanks to having these lines placed on it. Kind of looks like crown molding in a way. At least I believe it's called crown molding. It's the sort of molding you can have on like the bottom of a forget the wood here, like the bottom of a wall, kind of like that sort of thing, like you do in houses. But yeah, it gives it a little bit of the other direction. This allows it again to be used, in the direction opposite of what their normal energy is. So you can see wooden planks stacked on top of each other still looks all right. Same for the clay bricks, same for the stone bricks, although this has less vertical energy because they're bigger bricks. Same thing for these bricks over here, and for the bookshelves, they have less vertical energy because it's, bigger bricks. So they don't work as effectively in like a single vertical column like this, but they do still have some vertical energy. Smaller bricks and these planks work better at that. And then these guys are kind of weird because they have 2 about equal sized bricks and then the skinny brick, but they do still work vertically relatively well. And of course the quartz, this is placed normally, but I already placed it, sideways, showed off the energy over here. And then some examples of this in a larger wall. You can see that these work well in, walls even of equal size, and obviously we already showed them in opposite direction of what their dominant energy is over there. And they just work very well for, just a standard wall block. Obviously, you're not going to generally do, use bookshelves all that much unless you're building a library or something. But these can make good wall blocks because, they do draw your eye kind of in one direction, with like the horizontal energy primarily, but they still can draw your eye vertically as well. So you can make a big, tall stone brick tower, or, clay brick clock tower, as I'm doing, or, make a big, tall wall of wood and stuff, and it will still look all right. And, you can see this even in real life buildings as well. The bricks stacked on top of each other still look fine. They do, the texture just draw your eye horizontally more than it does vertically, but it does still have that vertical effect. So it still looks all right done that way. Basically, I had to take a quick pause there to check my notes to double check I said everything I wanted to about these guys. But these guys basically, they work just like neutral energy blocks. Just they work best when they're in the direction of their dominant energy, but they can work like neutral blocks, just slightly less effective at being a neutral blocks than actual neutral blocks are. But they still work like it similarly. Then we have open versus closed energy. Open and closed energy is basically what decides what is a horizontal energy block, vertical energy block, or a neutral energy block. It plays a lot into it, but neutral energy blocks can be both open and closed, as I have a bunch of examples here. These are all neutral energy blocks that I'm going to show you here, but some of them are open, some of them are closed. What does this mean? Well, an open energy block is something like this. There's no boundaries in the texture of the block anywhere, making the texture open to the blocks around it, making them kind of just meld together seamlessly. Whereas right here, the polished granite, this normal granite, this polished granite, these are closed energy blocks. They do have boundaries in the texture of the block, making them closed to the blocks around them, making it more of, making a visible barrier between the blocks and giving more of a tile effect. They're still neutral because one single block, there's no energy to it. The boundary is equal on all sides. There's zero energy in this block. It is a neutral block, but this guy's open, this guy's closed. They create different visual effects. You can see it again here with all three of these specialty stones. Even the tops of logs are that way. And we have more over here, but here's another example of an open texture. Now this is a vertical texture. This is a directional block. This is vertical energy because there are planks placed, vertically, but they are open textures. There's no boundaries in a single side of a single one of these blocks. They flow into each other normally, but because they have the vertical lines, that makes them a vertical energy block. It's just an open directional block. And then we have more of these closed energy blocks, a variety of examples of them. And then over here, these are also closed energy blocks. They, have boundaries around them, just as the other ones do, but they also have like smaller pieces to them. They're still neutral energy because there's no energy to this. Just 8x8 grid of tiles here, and a 4x4 grid of tiles here, and a 2x2 grid of tiles here. But they're not open technically to their surrounding blocks, but they do create a nice, of course, tile effect, just like these guys do, just on a smaller scale because they already have some tiles within a single block, but they're still closed. Now, what does this mean? Well, not too much, honestly. Obviously, they give different visual effects. In open energy blocks, create and tend to create nice, smooth, seamless walls, while again, the closed ones tend to create a more tile block or brick-based effect for the wall. But there's not too much of a difference between how you use them, particularly when it comes to the open and closed neutral blocks. There's really not much of a difference. When it comes to vertical, or horizontal directional blocks, or any directional blocks really, it can create a little bit more of an effect. Because if there are open directional blocks like this, like a completely open directional block, then you can use them more effectively in a wall. Like, obviously this you would want to normally be a nice, tall wall, but it still works well horizontally because there's no boundaries in between any of these blocks. They make a smooth texture. You just generally want it to be taller than it is wide because it has vertical energy. But if it's closed in any direction, that can cause some problems if you're trying to build a big wall of it. And we'll get to that down here with partially open or partially closed energy blocks, where you have, stuff that, well, this is technically completely closed. I should probably move this over here. this is completely closed, but this does show like what some of the problems can be. This is honestly a relatively neutral block. It does have a bit of horizontal energy thanks to this top little bar, but it's otherwise fairly neutral. But because of that bar and the way it closes this block, it's technically already a closed block because it's a tile block, just like these guys over here. But that little extra bit of closure at the top of the block makes this tiny bit of horizontal energy actually a very strong horizontal energy for this block. You see, it doesn't look that great when stacked on top of each other, but it looks quite fine when it's stacked in a nice horizontal fashion here. It's just a little bit of closure that can greatly change the actual energy of the block. It's a single block, not that much horizontal energy, but once you start putting it together because of the closure, it greatly affects how you would use it. Now over here, this is an actual partial, open partial closed block. It is an open texture to the sides of, technically it's an open texture, even on the, if we get rid of our little overlap, if you look like right here, move my mouse away so the bounding box is in the way, that's technically an open texture. So I guess that's probably why I put it here. But yeah, it's because of that. The fact that it actually does connect there actually makes the horizontal energy that little tiny bit of horizontal energy even stronger. I should note that. It is still a closed energy to all directions, but that tiny little couple pixels of openness makes the horizontal energy stronger. There. Now I got why I was putting that there. But yeah, here you can see that it's open to all sides except vertically because of that little same bounding at the top of the block, which once again, even though, it's otherwise open and would seem to work okay vertically, that little bit of, closure at the top of the block combined with the horizontal openness makes it a horizontal energy block. But that, of course, can actually work the other way. It can make a otherwise relatively neutral block directional, but it can make an otherwise directional block more neutral, like with these semi-directional, semi-neutral blocks here. You see one block of planks, the lines go horizontally, it has horizontal energy, but the planks close the block vertically. Not what I meant to do. I meant to actually just grab it. Yeah, the planks, make it so that it doesn't, fit it seamlessly vertically. Each block has a clear vertical boundary between them because they're divided up into, 4 planks, each and every one of them. They do still, kind of, work together. You don't see the distinction. You can clearly see, okay, there's 1 block, there's 2 blocks, there's 3 blocks. But they do work well together because the texture is fairly well repeating. It's not, as super clear as this one, where you can very clearly tell the difference between each block, or even, some of these guys over here, where it's a lot more obvious. It's a less obvious closure, but, despite that, it still, has a fair amount of neutrality. Same thing with these bricks, 4 stacked bricks. They're closed block vertically, an open block horizontally, because the bricks overlap here. And of course the planks just continue on straight. Same thing with these guys, bricks overlap here, and then these ones are technically closed, but they create an overlapping texture horizontally, but not vertically, but they still work. And of course these pillar blocks here, they're closed horizontally. They have 4 little pillars there, but vertically they're open to each other and go straight into the next texture. That we have some unusual cases of open and closed energy. These are incredibly unusual ones. These are really the only 2 ones I've found when searching through the inventory here that are wildly different from all these other guys, because all these other guys, they're pretty clear. Right away, they have vertical energy, horizontal energy. They're pretty simplistic in terms of their open and closed textures. These guys are otherwise the most complex just because they have that little bit of openness, in that top line that really changes the energy of the block. But even that's like relatively simple. These guys over here, kind of complicated. Why? Well, let's start out with the purple blocks here. The center of these blocks are actually, as I said before, neutral energy. They're just, little grids of bricks. They don't have any energy to them. But the outside edges are fully vertical, and they close the block horizontally. But of course, they open the block vertically. These center guys, not only are they neutral, they're also closed as well. They don't have any open energy going vertically where they connect. But the pillars on the side, if I take my bounding box off, you can see very clearly do have open energy between them. They create a nice smooth line over the 3 blocks, which helps heighten the vertical energy that the direction of those pillars provide. And of course, they close it off horizontally. As you can see, the clear line in between the 2 side pillars of these 2 blocks there. Take the bounding box off again. See that a little bit more clearly. So because of the way that the closure and the openness of that little side pillar in the texture of the block works, it makes this a very strong vertical energy block, or horizontal energy block if you place it sideways, but effectively eliminates the horizontal energy here. So this is like fully vertical energy because of the way the open and closed texture works. It's just kind of an unusual case. This is like one of the single strongest energy blocks in the game of Minecraft, which is kind of strange that now we have this super strong energy block, but hey, it's just kind of a cool way they did that texture. And then these guys, hay blocks, or hay bales, technically. These are also a little strange because the hay texture in the background, they're a neutral texture, open neutral texture. They go straight into each other. There's no real divisions between them, horizontally or vertically. But then you have the actual bale lines, the lines of the actual bale holding all that hay together. They are open horizontally, but they create a bit of closure vertically. It's not at the edge of the block, so the blocks next to each other are still open to each other technically, but it creates a bit of closure within the texture of the block, inside the block. And this creates a fair amount of horizontal energy. It's still a semi-directional, semi-neutral energy block because of the fact that it is open at the top and it also nice and seamless. So it can be used in a wall like this, but it has a decently strong amount of horizontal energy to it because of the way that the orange lines close it inside the texture vertically. So it's a little bit unusual in the way that those two work, but they create some very unique, nice effects in terms of the textures of their blocks. And one thing about these open and closed blocks, unlike the neutral energy, just plain directional or neutral energy or semi-directional ones, where neutral energy blocks, you can pretty much use them in any shape, size, orientation, whatever. And the semi-directional blocks, you generally would prefer to use them in the direction of their energy, but can use them in the opposite direction if you need to or want to. Or the directional energy blocks, where you generally always want to use them like this, primarily in the direction of their energy. When it comes to open and closed energy, there's no real rules or guidelines on how it affects your building, because it's really a case-by-case basis. Like, how do the divisions in this block, or in divisions in the glass, or divisions in the logs, or divisions in these polished stone bricks, how does that affect your build? It really depends on the build itself and what you're trying to do. Or even like these tiles, how does that affect what you're trying to do with your wall? Again, really depends on the build, especially when you get into some more complicated ones. Obviously, these guys have a fair amount of horizontal energy, so you're always going to want to use these guys horizontally more than vertically, if you can help it. Particularly this one. This one you can get away with a little bit more vertical aspect because that little closure, little bit of closed energy, also kind of blends in a little bit with the kind of cobble texture, especially at a distance like here. You can't notice the horizontal energy quite as much in the normal sandstone block, but in that polished sandstone, it's still quite obvious. So, this guy you definitely want to use more horizontally than even this guy. This guy you can at least still use vertically, a little bit. Obviously, this guy vertical all the way or horizontal all the way if you have it placed horizontally. But, outside of like rare cases like this, it tends not to have that much of an effect on most builds. It's just something that can affect the directional energy of the block, like with these guys, and something that can occasionally crop up as a problem, particularly with the single tile blocks. That's what I refer to these guys as. One block is like one tile. That can affect builds at times. These guys don't affect builds quite as much because they have multiple tiles within a single block, so it can work in a number of a greater number of situations. But there are occasions where you don't really want to make a wall out of this, generally, ever. But like a wall of glass, it usually works perfectly fine. I mean, it's glass. It's not like you have very many other options. But also a wall of logs tends not to work all that well. But a wall of these guys can. It's kind of dependent on the texture of the block, what the block is, how it looks just in the end result, and what you're also trying to do with the block. There's just a lot of factors that go into how, or even if, open and closed textures affect your build. Most of the time they don't. Sometimes they do. It's just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. If you're using some of these blocks and something just looks a little off, maybe think about how that's affecting the energy of your wall and just the look of your wall. Directional energy, though, is the main thing you're having to worry about over open and closed energy. And then, finally, we have planar energy, which, by and large, normally doesn't matter. What is planar energy? Well, planar energy is the energy of the top of your blocks. The vast majority of block tops are neutral. They're either closed neutral, like these guys or these guys, or open neutral, like the top of these hay bales or the top of stone and the like. Or obviously another example of closed neutral, all these quartz blocks everywhere. But some of them do have a bit of directional energy, primarily the semi-directional blocks, because they have normally have the same texture on all sides. They have them on the top too. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, they're hard-coded to always be in one direction. Luckily, it tends not to matter that much. I mean, yeah, their energy is largely in this looking at it from this angle, this horizontal direction of, I believe, east and west. Yeah, they run east to west. But it normally doesn't matter too much unless it's more strict directional energy block, like these logs, these pillars, and especially these purple blocks. These you will want to obviously place in the direction of their directional energy. But the semi-directional ones, and obviously the neutral ones, tend not to matter too much in planar energy at all, just because of how we look at floors and ceilings. They just don't have as much of an effect in the plane, as I call it. I refer to x and normal x and y directions as the plane. Vertical direction is just when I start talking about vertical and horizontal energy. I don't technically it is a plane. It's a vertical plane, but I don't refer to it as that in talking about energy, at least. just to keep, discussion about this type of energy, or this plane of energy kind of separate. Yeah, it just doesn't have as much of an effect. Probably, it's a little difficult to ascertain why. I mean, obviously, this very much does, but this stuff really doesn't. I mean, this has the directional energy of these semi-directional blocks have a lot more of an effect when they're a wall than they ever do when they're just in the floor or a ceiling. And the only thing I can really guess to as why is just honestly, it's kind of hard to describe. Yeah, just the way that we see things, we humans see things, that it tends not to have as big of an effect for some reason. Maybe just because we're not as adapted to see patterns in beneath us or above us, but rather in front of us. I don't know. It's a little weird, but you generally don't have to worry about energy as much when you're dealing with floors and ceilings in the plane, as much as you do when you're building a wall. The only time you do is when you're working, again, with these directional energy blocks. So, how do we apply these lessons? What do these lessons actually mean for us? Well, we'll grab a few blocks here and go over here to show how they work. So let's say we're trying to build a small wooden house with a stone foundation of some sort. How are we going to do that? Well, there are a variety of ways that we can build it, but we are going to build it using our knowledge of energy. So we have these logs. We want to build some supports out of logs. So we build some nice vertical supports. There we go. And we keep them as, this is going to be like imagine this is a small hut, basically. We're just going to do a single column of these blocks. Now we want a stone foundation of some sort. We could use normal stone, but the foundation is only going to be, 1 block tall. So we're going to use these stone bricks instead because it has a little bit of horizontal energy. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we want just some wooden walls. Boop, 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 boop. And there we go. And this looks rather nice. We have a relatively horizontal wall of wood because it has more horizontal energy than it does vertical energy. We have this nice bit of horizontal energy from the bricks for our foundation and some good vertical energy flanking it all and also closing this in. Open and close textures do apply to your actual builds as well. Something to think about. But it closes it all in with a little bit of vertical energy to match, or not match, but contrast with the horizontal energy of the rest of the wall. Now let's say we're building a stone, brick, and marble building. In fact, let's say we're building a big, town hall or something. And we want to build a nice little entryway of some sort. All right. So we're going to want to use some quartz pillars. And we're going to want these to be like little pillars at the, before you reach the door. So this will be like a little overhang before you reach the door, like right over here or something. So we use some nice quartz pillars, slightly separated so they don't, to highlight their vertical energy, because we want them to actually look like pillars. We can use them horizontally, but we're not using them in this case. And then we want to have some sort of overhang. So we're going to put some stone brick slabs here. Give a nice little bit of horizontal energy to also close off these vertical supports. And then we're going to make a little triangle out of these bricks. Obviously, I would normally use stairs for some of this, but we're just using whole bricks here for example. And then what space behind it to give it a little bit of depth, just normal building techniques, we're going to put in some bricks. And see how that looks. It looks decent, but we could do better. Let's tear this down. I do still like this. There's a little bit of horizontal energy to close off the pillars. But how do I want to change it? Maybe instead we will do a triangle of brick. Since these are semi-neutral blocks, we can use them in a slightly more neutral manner. And let's actually grab some quartz blocks, put them one block behind. This is a little bit more neutral version of quartz. Well, it is a neutral version of quartz. So we can use it more next to each other like that, and that looks a little bit better. It's still not, obviously perfect. If I were to actually build something like this, I'd do something probably completely different. But it still gives a bit of a nicer look. Obviously, stairs would work a lot better here because it would help connect the energies of these blocks together. Would look a little bit nicer. But it still gives a little bit of horizontal energy as well as a tiny bit of vertical energy to this little triangle, and then some nice neutral energy in the background there. Now, what if we wanted to do a nice inside, interior wall, like a fancy interior wall, using some, largely wood wall, but using some other blocks as well. Let's go 5 spaces. We'll start out with some interior wooden supports, and then we can use these quartz pillar blocks. And we're actually going to place them horizontally, because they do have a little bit of horizontal energy to them. Similar to how I showed you earlier, to represent that, I'm blanking on the name now. That bottom part of walls that sometimes appear in houses. The molding, right, there we go. To act like a molding for the wall. And then we are going to place some, we can, at this point, we could just fill in the thing with planks. And that creates a decent wall. But you know what? I want something even better. So let's look over our options here. Is there anything here that I might want to use instead to break this up? Well, now let's go into our creative inventory. Something to break this up a little bit. How about some bookshelves? Yeah, I'd like some bookshelves. So maybe we place a bit of bookshelves right here. No, let's put them one higher. Yeah. But a bookshelves just to break up the monotony of the wall a little bit, give it a little bit more texture to it. And that looks a little bit nicer. Alternatively, we could, don't necessarily have to build it out of wood. We can use something like a stained clay block. What would be a good color here? Oh, nice. A nice light blue. Yeah. To act like paint or wallpaper. There you go. That's kind of nice. We could even do stripes. Some vertical stripes going in here. We want the white hardened clay. Yeah, there we go. Hey, that looks kind of cool. We can even do horizontal stripes. Doesn't matter. I don't really like that quite as much. I prefer the vertical stripes in this instance. So let's put that back. Goes well with the supports around it, and it also kind of counteracts the molding at the bottom, because although these things have vertical energy, they do have that nice little bit of horizontal energy to them. It's like a nice little repeating pattern, similar to how this is a nice repeating vertical pattern. You don't always have to follow the rules. You can, break the rules and come up with some interesting things. You usually want to follow the rules, but doesn't mean you have to. Doesn't mean that's always the best choice either. So that should hopefully give you a bit of an idea of what block energy is all about, and a little bit on how you can use it. Obviously, I'll be giving all sorts of examples through the course of this series as I build a bunch of stuff, and talking a little bit more in depth into block energy. And hopefully I explained it well as well. It can be a little confusing to people that aren't used to thinking about this sort of thing. I'm just breaking down these extra poles I don't need standing around. There we go. Yeah, it can be a bit confusing to newcomers, but as I said, I will be going over it more throughout the course of the series so you can see it in action and see more of what I mean by it and how to use it. Utilize it, how to utilize it, how to break it, and places where it can cause issues for you as well, because it'll no doubt cause me issues as I try to build stuff on the server. But that will be it for this video. Hope you've got a basic understanding of it. Next time, we'll be back on the server and starting to do some more construction on the clock tower. I have actually technically already started it, but don't worry, I've only done, enough to make the interior safe. It's only like about 5 blocks tall or something. It's not very tall. We'd have to go like 50 blocks up just on the base section. Though I did complete a Marrilcraft Square and start a bit of work on the roads. So I'll kind of show off both of those things. And we'll get into more work on the clock tower. And, well, I'll also get to show off some of my cool tools that I've built. I've already built an awesome, amazing pickaxe, so I'll be able to show that off. But that will be it for this video. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to ask in the comments below. And obviously, I hope to answer some of them in get into more detail on a lot of this stuff in future videos. That'll be it for now, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.